Good good morning, everybody. So we've heard many of the advantages of AI in the sessions this morning already. We know that AI is a key technology shaping the future of education. We know that large language modules have the capacity to produce fluent and coherent dialogues through prompting. And these capabilities can create opportunities to enhance personalization, feedback, and learner-driven exploration. But there are some disadvantages as well, or some questions that arise, particularly regarding AI and open educational practices. Many existing platforms and repositories, particularly referring to open educational resources, are still static. They're not really as open as we'd like to think they are, also limiting transparency, adaptability, and user control. Now, to fully realize the potential of AI to support open educational practices, it's essential to redesign these environments so that they are more open, more transparent, and adaptable. But such a shift would enable more meaningful interaction with open educational resources, and that will allow the learners or students to remix, adapt, and personalize their learning, typical that OER stands for. An important question that we often overlook is how synthetically generated AI content can be integrated into the open educational discourse, particularly relating to openness. The integration of AI-generated dialogues requires thoughtful policy, pedagogical vision, and technical design to ensure alignment. And we've heard some of this already from the presenters this morning. A key aspect of the open education movement is access, equity, and transparency. Those are things that underpin open education, and we wonder to what extent can AI actually underpin these aspects. Self-directed learning is a foundational concept of adult education, and our keynote this morning mentioned Montessori and the shift to learner-centered learning, and also he mentioned self-directed learning. Knowles is also quite well known for his work on self-directed learning, and I have the definition for self-directed learning on the screen. I'm not going to read through it. You can have a look at that yourselves. Individuals can work with or without the help of others. In other words, it can be an individual process, but it can also be a process in which people work together, collaborate. But it goes about taking responsibility for your learning, and definitely it emphasizes the active, intentional role that learners play in shaping the educational journey, unlike traditional instructor-led models of learning. So STL centers on the development of autonomy, responsibility, and self-motivation. And in many contemporary education systems, particularly those that use open educational practices and flexible learning environments, the principles of self-directed learning really are critical to prepare learners to navigate this new world that we are all facing. I heard in a conversation also this morning, people saying, how are we preparing our students for the future? The students that sit in front of us in the class might be having or doing careers that don't exist yet. And in that aspect, self-directed learning is such an important aspect because we need to reinvent and rework what we know for future events, future learning. So in other words, self-directed learning learners are best equipped because if they are acting as self-directed learners, they should have the necessary dispositions, tools, and technologies to be able to function in the new environment, and particularly in terms of open educational practices. By exercising critical awareness and discernment, the learners not only enhance their own educational experiences, but also can contribute to the growing movement of open education. And core self-directed learning competencies like goal setting, self-monitoring, and reflective evaluations are essential for meaningful engagement, particularly in an AI world. So open educational practices, openness in education, there's so many terms that get used synonymously for this. Open learning, open education practices, they're all interconnected, but they all reflect a shared commitment to broadening educational access and removing learning barriers. And there are a number of different definitions. Cronin defines OEP as a broad concept and includes the creation, use, and reuse of open education resources, open pedagogies, and open sharing. Giza focuses on student engagement and creativity in their definition. Hodgkins-Williams refers to dimensions of openness, And Andrade and colleagues emphasize co-production and lifelong learning, which resonates very well with self-directed learning. I just quoted there the definition. Open educational practices are practices which support the reuse and production of OER through institutional policies, promote innovative pedagogical models, and respect the owner and empower learners as co-producers on their lifelong learning path, something so important that we've been talking about. In his talk in 2024, David Wiley did a talk on the topic, why open education will become generative AI education. And in that discussion, he said, 25 years ago, people started talking about open education and with the start of the open education movement. And the goal always has been to create and increase access to educational opportunities. And the primary tactic of open education movement to accomplish this goal is to create and share open educational resources. However, Wiley says, using generative AI is a demonstrably more powerful and effective way to increase access to educational opportunity. So if we are to remain true to our overall goal of open education, that is, we must begin shifting our focus from OER to generative AI. Our technologies are central, we've said that, to the future of open education resources and open educational practices. But the challenge is, how do synthetically generated AI content fit within the framework of openness? UNESCO has, and there's a lot of work on this, and we're all talking about this a lot at the conference, but UNESCO has done a lot of work on educating people around AI and generative AI. So in the UNESCO guidance for generative AI in education and research, they address this concern by calling for inclusive, ethical, and equitable policies that respect linguistic and cultural diversity and promote the use of generative AI to support lifelong learning. Their competency framework for teachers also further promotes the idea of lifelong professional learning as a key principle. And the UNESCO Assistant Director General for Education, Dr. Stefania Gianni, also said that teachers urgently need to be empowered to better understand the technical, ethical, we spoke about ethics earlier as well, and pedagogical dimensions of AI. So with the rapid advancement of AI, I see SDL as an essential capability for teachers and for students. And the important aspect that we need to remember here is AI literacy and continuous learning. The thoughtful integration of generative AI can be used as a form of dynamic open education resources where it can offer personalized feedback, support multimodal interaction, and enable learners to co-construct knowledge in open, self-directed ways. Generative AI can address long-standing challenges in open education, such as learner engagement and the wider reach and adaptability of resources and inclusive access. So unlike traditional teacher-centered classrooms where teachers dominate most of the dialogue, AI-driven classroom conversations shift the focus to the learner, which is also typical of self-directed learning. It empowers them to take greater responsibility, make autonomous decisions, and actively construct knowledge through dialogue. Prompting is very important. So when prompted correctly and carefully, generative AI supports the creation of diverse and inclusive learning resources. So these AI-generated conversations function as dynamic OER, resources that respond in real time to learners' needs, providing contextualized feedback, promoting co-construction of knowledge. So here is a proposed model, conceptual model, which illustrates how dynamic OER can serve as a catalyst for self-directed learning by fostering autonomy, reflective thinking, and goal-oriented learning behaviors. As learners engage with AI-mediated content that adapt to real time, they are better equipped to take initiative in managing their own educational journeys. At the center of the process are the empowered learners. These are individuals who develop the confidence, skills, and motivation to drive their own learning within open, AI-supported contexts. And the outcome of the process aligns with overarching goals of open education, and that is to advance learner agency, inclusivity, and lifelong learning. There are, of course, many challenges. We've highlighted some of those already. Ethical and legal concerns, which center around authorship, ownership, responsible content generation, which is often questioned, not really content generation, but content recycling in effect. Another challenge is systemic biases. There's a need to reflect the diverse cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic perspectives of AI. The fragmentation of the OER infrastructure. Many repositories, however we say that they are open, many repositories are unconnected and lie within institutional repositories. So how open are those repositories really? And it's difficult for teachers and learners, students, to locate, adapt, or remix those materials effectively. And of course, teacher preparedness. We also spoke earlier about AI literacy. That's really an important aspect. The lack of foundational knowledge of AI in terms of teachers, facilitators, as well as students, and the importance and the role that we have as educators in training and supporting AI literacy. So some of the implications of the work that I've done is the integration of AI within open education requires a renewed focus on ethical and inclusive design. We can't say that enough. Institutions need to address the technical limitations of the existing OER infrastructure. Like I mentioned, how open really are some of the OER infrastructures. Professional development needs to be prioritized, AI education or AI literacy education. And researchers like us need to evaluate the impact of AI-driven open educational practices on learning outcomes, learner engagement, and equity. So just some recommendations from the work that I've done for institutions and for policymakers. We really need to establish, and some institutions have, some countries have, some are still working on it. We need clear ethical guidelines for AI use in open education. And the alignment with SDL principles and learner agency can certainly be a guide towards that. Compatible and accessible OER infrastructure, where we can support the remixing and the contextualization. Promote inclusive AI design, where we reflect on the diverse cultural, linguistic, and educational backgrounds of our learners. Learning how to prompt so that the AI can generate information from within the context that you want it to generate it from. We need to look at providing sustained reflexive professional development. We've mentioned that, and encourage ongoing cross-disciplinary research. The effectiveness and equity of AI-enhanced, open, self-directed learning environments. Thank you for listening. I think I was a bit short.